All right, we're live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crisis, What Crisis? And thanks for tuning into this event. And thanks all the participants. This is a conversation that's scheduled to occur alongside the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 45th President of the United States of America. Myself, Mohammed Salemi, and my colleague, Jason Adams, will moderate the conversation. And we've invited a range of scholars, thinkers, and artists to join us to respond to specific questions or bring up ideas and topics that they feel needs to be discussed on such a historic day. And the central question with which the group will engage is the current political crisis indicative of a routine shift between successive presidencies or a brand new stage of capitalism, a harbinger of a longer term shift between liberalism proper and its incipient authoritarian tendencies? Or is it instead suggestive of a much broader shift, one we have not experienced since the dawn of the European Enlightenment and the rise of humanism? And I'm particularly referencing my own thoughts on the matter and Membe's recent published piece on end of humanism, of how these changes might be indicative of a much larger shift. Jason, do you want to continue the rest, or should I read?
Okay, sure. So the discussion will also focus on what the current U-turn might mean for thinking, organizing, and acting in the years to come. And the thinkers and intellectuals we're bringing together here will grapple with these questions as they consider the complex relationship between socio-political and media-technological regimes as they mutually transform one another over time. So kind of thinking a kind of Hitlerian type of question of the relationship between media and politics.
Yeah. So I don't know which end of the conversation we would like to begin, the media politics or just purely the political stuff, because I see like maybe we should, I mean, I said I'm not going to like put someone on, but maybe Doug, maybe you want to like, you've been very vocal and active from the beginning of the primaries, especially with your book on Hillary Clinton called My Turn. And maybe you want to like start off by just like giving us some of your thoughts.
Okay, well, I'll keep it brief, but I would say a couple of things. One is that Hillary's defeat, although she won the popular vote, but her loss, and the erosion of the Democratic Party underneath her, below the presidential level, it seems like a part of a global crisis of the center-left, what Nancy Fraser calls progressive neoliberalism. That whole movement seems utterly bankrupt. The Democratic Party doesn't seem to have figured this out yet. They're flirting with people like Cory Booker and still sticking with that stuff. They've got David Brock and people like that trying to lead to a reinvention of the thing, but it just looks like putting a set of fresh tires on a wreck. And it seems to be kaput, that whole kind of progressive neoliberalism that Hillary really embodied and helped create with her husband starting in the early 90s when they created the Democratic Leadership Council. So now, but looking at the Trump thing, two things strike me about it. One is that it just seems like all the masks have been ripped off. And we are now living in a frank plutocracy. The quality and nature of his cabinet appointments are truly stunning. You know, it's a cabinet of billionaires. Even somebody as grotesque as George W. Bush didn't have a single billionaire in his cabinet, and Trump has countless numbers of billionaires in his cabinet. So there is that, but there's also, it seems to be a particularly, we're going into a rule by the rich, very obviously, but it's also by the worst part of the rich. This is not a kind of an entrepreneurial, dynamic crew. In some ways, to me, the embodiment of this new administration is Wilbur Ross, who is a vulture capitalist who makes money on bankruptcies. And this seems to be what the American ruling class, or at least this branch of it, is all about now, which is pocketing as much money in the short term as they can because they've really given up on the long term. We see this in the education secretary, Betsy DeVos, who seems to have a vision of American schools as for-profit enterprises that will act as holding pens for people, especially those with below the median income, who will then graduate into a world of crappy jobs. And they seem to have given up any notion of a dynamic future for the United States. It's, Trump keeps talking about making America great again, but his appeal seems not more nostalgic than forward-looking. I don't see anything like a vision of, even a grotesque capitalist like Elon Musk is somebody who's taking risks for some vision of a dramatic future. That's not the Trump vision. It seems to be bitter, repressive, backward-looking, xenophobic, not at all expansive. So, all the expansive, forward-looking sides of capitalism have been kicked to the curb, and now we seem to be in this really ugly, bitter, really horrifying phase. And I just hope that we can mobilize some kind of opposition to this at this point. It's encouraging to see demonstrations from the first, encouraging to see pressure on individual Congress people, at their district levels happening from the first. So the early signs of resistance are encouraging. But if you look at things at the elite level, it seems you have a bankrupt ideology in the Democratic Party and this horrendous, frightening, ghoulish ideology of Trump. And it seems like our elite has just completely rotted.
What do you think in terms of strategy for the left and specifically for socialists? In terms of, do you think the Bernie strategy is something worth repeating at this point, or go more in the direction of trying to organize a kind of third umbrella type party or something?
I'm all for all of it. Bernie is doing a very good job of leading a visible sort of mainstream resistance to Trump. Most of the other Democrats are missing in action. So it's quite inspiring to see him fighting every day after day. The way he was questioning Betsy DeVos the other day was really pretty sharp and great. And you don't see a whole lot of other Democrats doing that. But, I think there's also a great opportunity for pushing further left. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. There are people, there's a great division of labor, divisions of temperament, and people who are more interested in radical organizing. I'm all for it. People who want to disrupt the inauguration, I'm all for that. Fight on many fronts. I'm all for it.
Great.
Doug, I have a question. Just to maybe, seems like from the beginning of the primaries, both the right and the center Democrats, they knew that this is becoming a three-way fight between a sort of left, center, and right. Which means Hillary had to fight both Sanders and Trump. Trump was fighting both Sanders and Clinton. But it seems like the confusion about this two-sidedness, good and bad, liberal, conservative, is still sort of a kind of confusion that a lot of quote unquote liberals or left in America still kind of suffers from. How would moving forward, how would it be, how can one devise a strategy of quote unquote resistance which kind of understand this complexity that America finally might have left, and how to develop alliances with liberals over certain things, but also make sure that the project is not overtaken by liberals and we don't end up with a candidate like Obama again in 4 years?
Well, I think it's clear that the center of the Democratic Party, Hillary and her colleagues, were running against the left, and that became the enemy. And it almost seemed at times, and still seems at times, that they would rather lose than tack substantially to the left or defer to anybody on their left. And so we saw the spectacle of Hillary's surrogates saying, nothing is free in America, running against social democracy, even to some degree. You saw pundits like Jamel Bouie calling into question Social Security, which was, one of the origins of it, one of the touchstones of Democrats are rightly proud of. So that really, the primaries really opened up that fissure between liberals and the left. And now with Trump, moments away from taking the oath of office, I guess, the liberals are still fighting the same battles. They're fighting the left. They're calling us purists. They're calling us obstructionists. They're blaming us for having brought on President Trump. I'm talking mostly about elite liberals, people who are pundits or politicians or academics, people who really, are paid to be liberals for a living. There are certainly a lot of rank and file people who I think could be peeled off for a more radical movement. And I'm happy to work with them, talk with them, try to proselytize among them. But I think those elite liberals I'm talking about are really the enemy. They're part of the problem. And I think we just have to give up on them and treat them as the enemy they are. And they don't like hearing that. They take a great offense. They'll blame us for Trump. They'll call us stooges of Putin. And that whole, the Putin thing is a whole story in itself. But so be it. They don't have the energy or the ideology, or even they've got some organization, but they showed their failure during the campaign organizationally. So I think they're a problem, and we just need to be done with them. They're the enemy for the most part.
I think others will have opinion about this question and maybe a differing opinion than you, but we can maybe see how it evolves, this question of like how to make a tactical or even strategic alliances with liberals, and how without getting dissolved into them. But maybe we can talk to Nina a little bit. Jason, do you want to ask some questions from Nina?
Yeah, I was going to maybe combine the first and the last question that we had here. So the first one being, is the current political crisis, and this would actually be good for Stephen as well, but maybe start with Nina. Is the current political crisis merely indicative of a routine shift between successive presidencies? In other words, is it a kind of a normal shift between presidencies, and or is it something else? And then the second question being, in relation to that, if it is something else, does this possibly have anything to do with the relationship between socio-political and media technological regimes? Is there something in the kind of current media technological landscape that maybe played a major role in kind of where things are going right now, and what we can do?
Right. I mean, in some ways, I think from the media point of view, I mean, this looks like something like an 80s or 90s image of this kind of like dystopic, kind of sociopathic, narcissistic person who's managed to mobilize, like, I mean, whatever the internet might have been imagined as in the 80s, as a way, I mean, as some kind of like, I don't know, chronic troll or something. I don't know. I mean, I have this kind of overwhelming question whenever I think about people like Trump and the billionaires in his presidency who mentioned before, which is, I mean, maybe a very philosophical question in some way, an existential question, but how do they conceive of their own finitude? I mean, what is like their own death to them? And maybe, because we've all been thinking about death so much in the past week because of Mark Fisher's recent death. And it just strikes me that on some level, there has to be this kind of fundamental denial of the possibility of Trump's own death in the mind of Trump. I don't know what it means, but I mean, it's clearly a kind of extremely destructive idea, this idea that you are somehow, I don't know, always going to be there to destroy everything, to kind of take the last remaining crumbs of money and life and joy from the world, to asset strip the entire planet if you can. And I think maybe it's this kind of question about the relationship between finitude and the finitude of the rich and the finitude of the poor, in terms of how we might conceive of an image of the future. And I think in Britain for quite a long time now, I mean, we basically just kind of copy everything that happens in America. This kind of question of the future, or really like this lack of future, the no future, not just of sort of Lee Edelman's queer idea, but a kind of as a sort of political position, particularly among those who are young, who are now drowning in debt, will likely not get work, and I think then these figures, we have our budget tyrants as well. I mean, people like Nigel Farage, who's the leader of UKIP and is obviously a key Trump supporter. I mean, he's even more, well, I don't know. I mean, can we compare the grotesque comedic relation value of each of them?
Can I jump
and
in?
I think Britain is sort of just becoming more like an offshore tax haven, and in some ways historically Britain should be punished for its role in history and its role in colonialism and slavery. But of course that it's not going to play out like that. It's going to play out in terms of punishing those who are already punished. I mean, the poor, the disabled, single mothers, asylum seekers, the cuts we've had to everything like that, to the NHS, to legal aid. I mean, we're just copying it. So I mean, on some level, they are all talking to each other. I mean, these elites, right? I mean, I don't know what the hell they say when they get together, but I don't know. I mean, this question of their death, I wonder what people think. If
Can I jump in?
Yeah. Let's go, Catherine, and then maybe Stephen if Stephen's up for it.
Oh, sorry, Stephen. I'm just going to jump in and say that I disagree with the fact that Trump stands for death or this kind of death of pleasure. In fact, you said he's carnivalesque. And I think that his grotesquerie actually provides for a spectacle of enjoyment that precisely the sort of Calvinistic punishing aspect of center-left austerity throughout the world needs to be countered by. I'm not defending him, but I'm just saying that to attribute to him this kind of necrophilia is a kind of very hyper-sophisticated, just let me finish, a hyper-sophisticated theoretical overlay. And I really think that you have to understand his popularity as a function of this like appetite, this body that is Rabelaisian and immortal. He loves to grab pussy, he loves to curse, he doesn't speak in the tone of the professional managerial class, which actually is very death-like these days. It's wearing a death mask. And who's presiding over it is this kind of like, decadent late Roman figure of the appetites. And if we can't see that, if we go into some kind of melancholia, then we stand on the side of the professional managerial class who actually is all about punishment. Because the center-left austerity politics have given us Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, Marine Le Pen, the Hungarian right. That's why I think that you can't just put this death-life paradigm into play without looking at economic policies, and also the low, vulgar, carnivalesque pleasures of Donald Trump. Because frankly, he's kind of funny to me. And I totally relate to him because I'm from New York City. I curse all the time, and I'm fucking angry. And everyone's like very measured on the Democratic Party side. And that is fucking wrong because things really suck. So I'm not going to speak in this tone. I'm not going to speak in this measured like smarty pants tone today. Sorry, I'm too upset today. So you're going to get a slice of me that's very raw. And Nina, I don't even know you, so I'm speaking to your discourse in solidarity. I think we need to talk to each other in a more honest way these days. And I don't like the theoretical overlay right now of politeness. We should just fight things out and come to better conclusions. So.
Fine. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, to be honest. I mean, my point was more about Trump's own relation to his own finitude, not that he.
I don't give a fuck about that. Why?
No.
Why do you care about that?
It was a kind of question about how these people relate to death.
It's the state planning problem, I think.
Question. I don't know. I mean,
there'll be more chances to maybe like work this out. Stephen, would you like to respond to Jason's original question about the relationship between sort of like changes, like the changes in the media regime and the political regime, as someone who's worked like directly deal with this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do agree with what Catherine was saying in terms of, I mean, obviously Trump's victory has to do with being the id rather than the superego, but I always have this kind of double sense about it. When I talk to people in Europe and I try to explain all the horrible things Trump's going to do, and then each one of them is something which, well, Hillary sort of was going to do that also, except not as vicious. So Trump's going to try to destroy Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare. The Democrats sort of want to limit those programs to, reduce them. Trump's going to totally destroy public education through Betsy DeVos, and the Democrats have been complicit in undermining public education. And it's sort of like every single issue, Trump is a total monster. It's sort of, like what the Democrats have offered. I don't mean Senator, I mean Clinton, the mainstream Democrats. It's sort of like this kind of barbaric ultra-capitalism with a human face. I mean, they'll do it nicely, but they still want to, Obama sort of wanted to reduce social spending, but Republicans wouldn't make an alliance with him because they wanted it more extreme. I mean, I don't know. I mean, so I'm sort of torn between, on one hand, looking at the immediate situation, which is how much of a monster Trump is, and on the other, sort of seeing that the real reason we're totally screwed is because this is something that both parties want to do. It's part of a general, capitalist consensus. I mean, I don't know. And therefore, I'm not sure I see the link, between, doing better political things in the short run, which I really do agree with, but also seeing that it's not going to be a way out, and we're going to get more of this just because of the ways that the whole dynamics work. So, I mean, I just have this total double vision that these two layers both exist, and I can't reconcile them.
So what about the question of the media? How much do you think Trump represent a new form of communication and new forms of sort of like mediation? Did he take advantage of that? The fact that he was more prone to the new media, and how much what would that do to the future of sort of like communication technologies at the level of mass? In the coming years?
I don't know. I mean, this is something which I think goes both ways. Obviously, Trump's mastery of Twitter is an important aspect, and other social media stuff, even though he doesn't seem to understand anything about 21st century communications and media except for Twitter. But again, I don't know. They're the two extremes, which both neither make sense. Is one to say, well, these are just neutral and anybody can use them, and one to say that they're somehow the determining factor, which they're not. So I don't have a good answer for that either.
Okay, so we got so many awesome people in the hangout. I was gonna go to take a little bit of like a art detour and maybe bring Judith in and get some of Judith's reflections, because she's been also very active from the beginning of the primaries and kind of watching and commenting on political developments, and she comes from a particular sort of like field of art history, and maybe some insight as to like what she thinks the role of art and humanities can be at this point, and how fairly we did during the primaries, maybe, and an assessment, and maybe like or any kind of other reflections you have, Judith.
Well, I'm looking at this set of questions that you circulated, and the thing that occurs to me in the first instance is to think about academia. Of course, that's where I'm located, and to assume that academia is going to sort of trundle along as it has for the last 50 years, I think, is a mistake, particularly for those of us who are working in public institutions. So there are two of us here at the University of California system, and that's what I'm sort of churning over during this catastrophe, right? And trying to understand what the role is of this academic culture and academic language in terms of public speech and public analysis, right? So I'm devoted, in fact, at the moment, to eliminating jargon, I think, and that's as deep as I can get. I mean, today is art strike, right? So here we are. Here I am, not exactly striking. Hanging out, not working, I suppose. The question for me, and I have great ambivalence about the notion, although I'm in support of the impulse. The question for me is what kind of effectiveness that can have within its own arena and beyond. So where does art actually function in the broader cultural scape? Now, the first things that were announced yesterday that Trump wants to cut are these microscopic pieces of the federal budget that have to do with the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. That's absolutely symbolic. On the one hand, and then on the other hand, anecdotally, I was just at one of the White House Christmas parties a few weeks ago. And at the Christmas party, the musical accompaniment is delivered by a Marine Corps jazz band, right? What happens to that military decoration once you actually cut out arts funding? So there's a very interesting set of symbolic moves that are being made that I am not sure will be fully followed through, and I don't know how they actually play out. Does it mean if you cut that kind of funding, then in fact the arts, such as they are then wholly dependent upon funding from oligarchs in a direct way rather than an indirect way? I don't know, and so that's where I am, in a state of perplexity, preparing for the camps, and I think the first people to go will be artists.
Tell us.
Let me try one other thought balloon, which is this idea about. I agree with Catherine that Trump is absolutely Rabelaisian in many dimensions. It's like a giant shitstorm, right? And there's a way in which he has taken the televisual form or format of the chat show, which is a sort of Kennedy era visual technology, and perfected that. My students don't, it's hard to say this, but they don't understand the difference between fact and fiction. They have a very hard time peeling those two things apart and understanding when news is factual and when it's opinion based. And that strikes me as a really alarming cultural development among young people, and wholly a product of the chat show format and of reality TV. I'll leave that there. So the inauguration is just flipped in. I'll turn it over.
Just a question. How did the letter come about? The J20 art strike letter. How did you get involved, and how did it come about? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, somehow you got muted. If you unmute yourself. On the top of the screen. I think you're unmuted now. Go ahead.
Okay, am I there? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a peripheral observer, really, but I am getting a variety of updates. Partly, it's purely bureaucratic. It's because I'm chairing the College Art Association annual meeting, right, which is a meeting that will take place in a month from now in New York, with approximately 4,000 attendees of this professional association. And as the chair of that, I tried to make some space for essentially these emergency get-togethers related to J20 and beyond. So not just thinking about one day, but rather, what is it that at the sort of small level of the professional associations and networks that we have as art historians, what can we do moving forward, right? Devising plans, strategies, tactics, and so on. So, I'm in a bureaucratic place where I can make space for that conversation.
Thank you. Paul, I really want somebody, maybe you can help us with the question of like being a Kittler student and working with Kittler for so long. Maybe you have some insight into what's the relationship between politics and media at this moment, at this juncture. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. I also like just to say that Paul's going to be teaching a seminar for us on cryptology coming this Tuesday, starting this Tuesday.
Yeah, maybe we can. I mean, it's a very broad question, and I think the question of politics and media starting now is something that we'll have to discuss on a massive scale. But we can approach it maybe from the angle of privacy and cryptology. I mean, you asked before, and people have been discussing a lot why, like, what it means that Trump approaches something like Twitter that carelessly and openly, and sort of this anarchist approach to self-publishing that's like a nightmare for his own PR people. On the other hand, it could also be very well orchestrated in a way. Or I think the immediate effect it's going to have is that it's going to make people more careless in the way that they publish information on the internet. And I mean, we can be pretty sure that every kind of civil liberties on the internet are going to be restricted even more than they already are. On the other hand, I'm not American, and I'm one of these Europeans who perceive American media from afar. So we have a very restricted view of it that's sort of, again, filtered through whatever, you know, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and John Oliver. So that's a tough one for me. I think what the election really made clear, the whole election process in the way that it used propaganda and different media channels, but then also the whole discussion about the hackability of elections is the very fact that this is a topic now and it hasn't been before. You know, I mean, we had sort of suspicions of fraud and also the role of machines when we were discussing debug machines in the Bush election a long time ago. But now this is sort of the first real internet election in a way, you know, the first real 21st century post-Snowden internet election, and it's there, and people don't even really give a shit that that everything has become hackable, and that it's quite certain that it is hackable, you know, in whichever way. In whichever way, but I don't really know how to approach it because it's such a broad. So there's different angles.
You're not necessarily referring to Russian hack, but like Trump's own use of technology as a form of hacking the election via the excessive use of Twitter and the way, I mean, we all know how there were like few good articles that came out about the digital strategies of the Trump camp, and excessive Twitter use was just one of them. The other one was advertising anti-Clinton and sort of like ads and targeting them towards like the more left side of the Democratic Party to make sure they stay home and they don't vote. Another strategy was to sort of like create this like rural electorate by kind of like producing them literally in data out of noise. And a couple of other kind of like very smart and advanced strategies that they used in order to sort of like basically break the statistical barrier that kept saying Trump's gonna lose, and then they were like, okay, now that we're gonna lose, we have all sorts of freedom to be creative in terms of the use of technologies. And I think they really
interesting about it is mostly the fact that it was heavily strategized, but at the same time, I think there was a lot of improvisation and a lot of randomness, and that's the interesting thing, that it introduced noise into the whole process. You know what I mean? That it wasn't just a very carefully orchestrated media campaign with billions of dollars in the background, but you can compare it to the way cyber warfare has changed in the past, say, 5 years. You know, like 5 years ago, we had Stuxnet, and there was this massive, it was like $1 billion project aimed at manipulating a tiny little valve in this Iranian nuclear facility. Now we have the Mirai botnet, where basically you just use whatever pile of scrap metal you can get that's connected to the internet and just throw it at someone, you know? So I think this is sort of the way that cyber politics might have changed too. That instead of trying to differentiate big data and really fine tune it in a way that there's been discussion about these addressabilities of voters in very small circles according to the Facebook data and stuff like this. Instead of doing this, what the Trump campaign did was introduce randomness into it. And I could imagine that some PR people and strategists were in the background saying, well, let him do it, you know? Because I think at first people were like, oh my God, you know, he's gonna just kill himself on Twitter. And then they realized it's actually quite brilliant because it's so noisy and random that it resonates with the people on many different levels. It's relatable in a way. It makes him very human because he's so insane. And at the same time, he's better than a bot army in a way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It introduced noise into the process.
Could we maybe turn the question over to Catherine? I thought maybe you might have some insight into that same thematic. I don't know if you want to
about the media, about the media itself.
Yeah. Just the effect of the tension between the intense directness of Trump's use of digital media, sidestepping the kind of traditional mediated official media.
Well, I'll just repeat what I said earlier. In some way, there's a war between technocracy and this like alleged spontaneity of free markets and business. And as Stephen pointed out, the Democrats pretend to be technocratic, but they just want to rationalize inequality. What you have on the Republican side is this incredible figure of spontaneity, Trump, who seems to be able to directly connect with the people. Now that spontaneity and connection actually comes out of cyber utopianism in the early days of personal computing, when you thought we're going to blow up the technocracy, at that time the military industrial complex, using Apple. So in some sense, Trump is like the countercultural hero. He's like the culmination, the dream of Silicon Valley, someone who connects directly with the people through the interface. Now, we've had authoritarian populists like him before. Berlusconi was one. Peronista. There have been many strong men, but you have a strong man now with, you know, a smartphone. And that smartphone was supposed to liberate information, connect us with each other, create social mobility, create personalized relations. Well, Trump is incredibly good at creating a personal connection with this kind of inchoate popular resentment that comes out of the destruction of the social safety net in the United States.
You know what the interesting point is?
If you don't talk about class here, you're not talking about politics right now. And all of this is overlaid on class resentment and class war from above that appears to be channeling a kind of popular rebellion against whom, I mean, Doug Henwood described it very well, against the Democratic Party that is doing the work of capitalism with Stephen put it a nice face, I would say like a rational face. And Obama was a hipster face, like a stylized face, but they were still doing the work of the ruling class.
Paul, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point. I mean, you were talking about sort of technocratic populists,
versus populists, technocrats versus populists.
Yeah, but what I find interesting is the question of the channel, because this is the first time that there's a back channel, you know, and Trump does both things. First thing is he does address single people. That's he singles them out and he points a finger at them in good or bad, you know, which is sort of the hand of God reaching down to you.
Now, Paul,
and
I just want to say there's a precedent about that. And Ayatollah Khomeini used to go on TV every day. He used TV excessively. And he would do these daily sermons, and then in these daily sermons, he would point to particular politicians or opposition figures, right? To the point that there was this joke among like the technocrats in Iran that like Ayatollah Khomeini uses television as a telephone. So instead of picking up a phone and talking to someone,
Yeah.
you just do it on television. And I think Trump you're trying to say Trump is doing that.
Yes, he
He's
is.
doing
Yes, he is.
that, but he's not just talking to other politicians. He's talking to like the shop owner across the street, someone who tweets back at him and says, "Trump, go fuck yourself." He would say, "Well, you're just a loser," you know. So he's like he's really engaging in this kind of conflict, which is very interesting. What I found very interesting, though, is what you said about that he's a Silicon Valley dream, which
He's
is
a disruptor. He's the giant disruptor. He is the disruptor.
Exactly. I mean, in the way that you present the argument, it makes total sense. On the other hand, because it seems to me that he's a total nightmare for Silicon Valley. People are really scared of him, and that is actually, I think, a potential for resistance. I was really wondering, like, if he manages to fuck up his relationship with Silicon Valley by making them, you know, I don't know, produce hardware in the US instead of China, something like this, you know, then they might, I mean, we had these movements towards Collexit and stuff like this, you know, that towards secession of.
That's a dream. That's ridiculous.
Of course it's a dream. The dream.
But what I'm saying is, I wouldn't trust Silicon Valley to provide us with a utopia, because those motherfuckers are cheaters too.
But open question to anyone, like, what do you think the role of Silicon Valley in the next 4 years is going to be?
Well, you know, 4 or 8 years from now, the Silicon Valley could be the kind of human side of Trump. So cool. Again, you know, we have Mark Zuckerberg talking about running with Peter Thiel, who supports Trump, talking about running for things. I mean, again, I think getting a Silicon Valley person who would have a more progressive attitude towards technology would be just, you know, again, the same kind of iron heel, but with a human face. So cool. I mean, I don't see anything good from Silicon Valley people deciding that they should run things. I mean, you know, it's like, maybe this is too abstruse. It's sort of like the Republicans will be the alt-right and the Democrats will be the neo-reactionaries. I mean, you know.
Okay, that's confusing, but okay, let me put that in my mind and turn it around.
I wanted to see if our young scholar Dever from Berlin has something to say. Dever is a researcher who's been writing about and thinking about sort of like cognitive traps and how sort of like the overlap between art and propaganda in terms of like taking over cognitive processes. And we've had extensive discussions about this stuff when I hung out with him in Berlin last October, just before the election. Dever, if you're online, I want to see if you have some insight into the question of media. And
yeah, actually, I am online. Can you see me?
yes, and Dever is also doing a seminar for us next semester. One of our 3 Berliners who are all here, alongside Katarina, who's also like, I'm gonna like bring her into conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks. I would like to follow up on the notion of Catherine that she kind of doesn't like Trump, and on the media.
Sorry, notion of what?
Of that she doesn't like Trump, so to say.
That's like an understatement.
I'm not a bit confused because I don't think he exists, actually. I don't know who Trump is or what Trump is, because he's not a politician. He didn't. He has so to say no program. The only thing he did, and this is connecting to the idea of Paul with the noise, he produced. He isn't. He's just an entity that people can project their hopes and fears to, but he doesn't have a concrete program. He doesn't stand for anything, I think. And I think the clever thing that he did with his Twitter campaign was to steer up emotions in the people, so to say, and just make them emotional, but then target them directly with, so to say, cut messages. You know, so to say, tailored messages to everybody, so to say. You see my point? So the point is, the political entity doesn't exist actually yet, because he's not in the political system. He didn't, so to say, form within the action potentialities that he has as a politician. He's just imagining it, what's going to happen, so to say. And I think this noise. This noise that was produced was, so to say, to steer up the people and to make them emotional, and then you can target them much easier by paradox messages, so to say. You see what I'm saying? doesn't make sense in a way. So so I think he doesn't exist yet. I think he's quoting one. I think he's a fractal, not a hologram, but a fractal. He doesn't. He is, so to say, an entity that exists only by the very micro projections of everybody. Yet, and you have to see
fractal and hologram, holographic fractal hologram.
Yeah, so something like that. Because he didn't do anything yet politically. This
Oh,
is
at
the
least
point.
not yet.
Yeah, not yet. And the point is, we have to say, I mean, I'm not pro-Trump, I'm not against Trump. I'm happy that Hillary didn't win, let's say like this. But
Oh my God.
okay. I mean, from a European perspective, there are arguments to be pro-Trump.
Nina, do you want to say something, or do you want
to? Just something little. I mean, I think we can obviously talk about it in all of these different ways. And I mean, I think, anger is one response, sadness is another. I mean, there are various kinds of discourses that can help us to understand what's going on. I mean, and one of them would be psychoanalytic. And I think we have to understand, I like this idea of Trump as this kind of fractal, hologrammatic kind of media disruptor and so on. But I mean, on some other level, I mean, if we're talking about reality and if we're talking about social manipulation and manipulation of individuals in terms of emotion, which he clearly is accessing and arousing people's emotion, we have to think about him as a kind of as a narcissist, in a classic psychoanalytic sense. What is he doing? I mean, he's literally, when he speaks, if you look at the analysis of his speech, I mean, he just says words until he gets a kind of response. It's not really about the content so much as kind of creating this atmosphere of emotion, and then people can kind of feel like they are both collectively and individually charmed or, overwhelmed by this feeling. And because he's so lacking, ultimately, I mean, if he is a textbook narcissist, which it seems like he is, I mean, his fundamental lack is what's kind of driving him to get this kind of, the biggest feed, the narcissistic feed you could possibly imagine, being president of the free world. I mean, I wonder, I mean, what people might think of analyzing Trump in all these different ways. How can we put these analyses together whilst preserving our anger and our commitment to political action, but not dismissing, academic ways of thinking or theoretical ways of thinking about what's happening. It seems to me that we need those discourses and those ways of framing reality and understanding what reality is more than ever, because that's what's being destroyed.
I will just message. This is kind of like interesting. A friend of mine just messaged me and said Pretzel Gallery in New York is broadcasting and projecting this in their video room. So there's like people in Pretzel Gallery watching us in New York City. So thank you, Pretzel Gallery, for like doubling this effort here. Since Katerina maybe dropped out, and you know what I mean, Doug, do you have anything? You're a very, very like able social media user, both your Facebook and your Twitter, very popular. Do you have something to say about like the whole media question before we maybe move on to Stefan?
Yeah, well, I actually have to step away for a bit, so let me make this my parting shot before I return. But I was thinking during all this talk about media that Hillary Clinton is not president right now for some very simple reasons. She had no message. She's a terrible politician. Nobody likes her. And then just in the technical terms, she failed to campaign in Wisconsin. She ignored the intelligence that she was losing Michigan. She didn't make one single appearance at a UAW hall in Michigan, even though Obama saved the auto industry. She could have campaigned on that. All her people were relying on big data rather than traditional, like knocking on doors and calling people on the phone. And their get out the vote operation may have actually mobilized a bunch of Trump voters. So they really, in both the big picture, the ideological picture, and in the technical picture, they screwed up big time. And, we certainly expect her to have screwed up the ideological side. But the fact that they did so badly in the technique of campaigning was not what one expected out of They were supposed to be the professionals. They had $1 billion to work with, all the finest minds in politics. And it doesn't have anything much to do with Twitter or any of that. But it's they failed at very traditional campaigning.
Thank you. Stefan, do you want to join the conversation?
Yes, I mean, I'm a bit not. Let's say we could level it up. I would suggest, like, if we stick just too much about the personal figure of Trump that is getting elected or not, or what happens after he's doing it's personalizing a political structure. And in opening up, I would suggest that first of all, you have a media situation which is that democracy itself is a technically very outdated ritual that is built on 18th and 19th century technology. We should frame it in a different way to say, like, if we want to talk about what is the technicalities of political decision making, then the democratic process as a whole should be more questioned. What we witness now is that we have different technologies, a battle of different social technologies to undermine the democratic election process. Things that this time, with the help of Cambridge Analytica and whatnot, was ahead. But I would also remind you that there's always that kind of theatrical. We have on one side a decision making, and in terms of political decision making, the questions are not necessarily questions that are presented to us as the electorate. It's a clear differentiation. For example, if I take Germany as an example, there's the rift between the Eurasian and the transatlantics, which is never ever being presented to the electorate. That goes through all the political parties. So within that communication situation, a theatrical surface on which certain questions are presented that are important. And I would also say the same counts for Trump. And for that matter, I don't think he himself is I don't necessarily see that. The only thing that is politically interesting is the seemingly the rift within the American wealthy governing communities, and that was kind of interesting to observe how for example, external policies or for economic policies are going to work out. We don't know, because Trump's message is random. Whatever he does, maybe his China policy works out like as he says, but that's also I would say it's premature to do anything. And how to say what is for me more important is, so to say, to build the line of resistance, but it shouldn't be the line of resistance against Trump. Rather be
what it should be
a line of resistance, along the lines. What kind of democracy do we want? Do we want to continue with that, so to say, 18th century ritual that just produces theatrical reels, so to say, against the real decision making? So there should be action. And then, of course, in the background is always and that's what makes the situation maybe what singles out our situation is the economic fight that seems to switch from the, how to say, speculative globalist exploitation together with military into a more so to say we want to defend our share and you're not going to have your share. So that is a shift that reminds me strongly of the 30s in Germany, and so we should be.
So if this reminds you of Germany, and you painted a picture of these two sides of the political like dynamics in Germany that are not often presented to the public in elections, right? But it's actually the underlying reality of the political competition in Germany. What do you think those two sides are besides this economic thing? Like geopolitically, what do you think these two, like what is the big fight about in America that then is presented through this interface of Trump and Clinton and all sorts of theatrics?
Well, I think the big shift is rather, is it enough to secure the profits, let's say, or the future payments? It's all about future payment, because that's what wealth is made of. And the big question is, okay, how do we preserve? Not we, I'm not part of that. How does the elite class preserve their wealth? Hegemonic policies, or by denying it to others? If that's not in very broad terms, no? So, and I would say the hegemonic neoliberal policy that was pursued by Clinton and Trump and also Bush, whatever, maybe it comes to an end, and now it's more about protect our profit and deny it to others, and that's a recipe for conflict, of course, of all types.
Thank you. We're waiting for Katerina Kolozova to join, but Jason, do you want to like pose some questions until Katerina gets in?
Can I say something?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know. What worries me partly is the idea that something which was fairly contingent, that Trump was able to defeat Clinton, becomes the whole basis that for everything's radically changed. And I'm just not convinced that that's so true. I mean, obviously, you have a small difference in votes translated to a very large difference in terms of the effects because of all the things that Trump's empowered to do. But it's more, I mean, a question of thinking about the difference between two things which Trump is channeling. One is his own completely impulsive, programless behavior, which involves his alliance with the alt-right and white supremacists. And the other is the program of the mainstream Republican Party, like Paul Ryan or the Koch brothers, which is basically to tear down all environmental regulations, all social spending, to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera. Ultimately, to have the Supreme Court rule, the Scalia and Thomas doctrine, that any social program whatsoever involves illegal takings from private corporations, and let's make all this stuff impossible and sell away all. So these are things Trump doesn't really give a shit about one way or the other, but he'll probably do because he's accommodating the people whose power base he needs. But there's this conflict comes between his impulses and the kind of alt-right program, which is gleefully destructive, and this deliberate attempt to build a harsher capitalist order, which the Republican Party is behind. And in both cases, the Democrats are trying to be good on multiculturalism, and they have a kinder, supposedly version of the economic predation, though they're not really opposed to it. So, I mean, I don't know. That's a different way of thinking about it than thinking about the importance of how media and how Trump as a figure is just changing everything, even though he is changing a lot, obviously.
What do you think of the case for, a lot of people on the left have obviously been calling for to not normalize Trump and to resist every single thing and to make it like an exceptional thing. What do you think of the case that has been made by some to actually do the opposite and to normalize Trump?
Well, I mean,
it's just for that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the many things that Clinton did wrong was that instead of having a positive message, she just had this thing, Trump is monstrous, Trump is not really a Republican, as if, what Paul Ryan wants or what Mike Pence would want are somehow within the pale. And in fact, I mean, the Republicans for 8 years refused to have any normalization. They completely attacked Obama on everything whatsoever. They played hardball. And the Democrats thought they'd do it back to Trump, but by doing it back to Trump, they're not doing it to the Republican Party, I mean, so I think there's a common, Trump is the only one who brings in the alt-right and the explicit white supremacists in this way. And he's certainly the most racist person in the White House since Woodrow Wilson. But, a lot of the horrors we're in for are horrors that the Republicans have wanted to do. And, they did part of it under Reagan, they went further under W, and now they're just going to go out for the, for the full Monty and do all these things. And that would have happened with Rubio as president, with Ryan as president, with Kasich as president, with any of these other people who are more mainstream and normative.
So maybe, what I mean, this is an argument against Stefan, because I'm trying to argue that. I'm going to put you on mute for a sec because it echoes in your space. So maybe maybe there is a use for Trump if maybe there is a use for Trump in this resistance, so-called, because he can be used as some kind of like a interface focus, even though this is not about Trump. These are like much larger sort of like set of ideas and policies that have been in motion for over like 30, 40 years, right? But maybe we should take advantage of the fact that we got someone like Trump, because he can create so much resentment, and this can be actually built back into the resistance. Instead of saying, it's not about Trump, it's not about Trump.
No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think on all these things, you know, whatever's happening politically has to get personified. And, you know, you can't, it would be true, I mean, it's a general truth that what's going on in terms of the accumulation of capital, expropriation, destruction of the former middle class, et cetera, is a process which pretty much both parties are doing in different ways. That Trump as the face of this is particularly horrible. But all I'm saying is that we should be prepared to think, oh, if Mike Pence becomes president or if Paul Ryan becomes president, somehow it's normalized as not, and we're free from the data. It's going to be, well, politics as usual.
It looks like Katerina has rejoined us, and we had a question from one of the friends of the New Center, Philip Wolstetter, and it's kind of a longer question, but I'm going to reformulate it at the end. So he basically asks, how should we talk about Obama in the last 8 years? Can we avoid talking about it if we want to understand where Trump comes from? Is there a way to negotiate the divide between the Arab American who called Obama a bomb with a smile on its face, and the part of us that revealed in that marvelous sight of beautiful black bodies living for 4 years in that slave owner's mansion, aptly called the White House? How do we on the white left talk about our comrades of color who have rightly invested so much affect into grace under extreme vituperative pressure of Barack and Michelle, and not get caught up in the bad infinity of race versus class, leaving us way more disorganized than the right? And so I'm just tacking on to the end of that and kind of reformulating. Basically, how do we talk about, now in retrospect, now that we're in the Trump era, how do we talk about the Obama era in retrospect? How do we talk about the campaign that just ended, in which, how do we talk about Obama now? How do we talk about Hillary now? And how do we talk about Bernie now? And so I would just pose that to Katerina, and then other people can reply.
Well, I don't think that we can define this as Trump era, nor we should relate it to the Obama era. I believe that this era has begun before, but it has begun elsewhere. It has begun in the east of Europe, first of all. I mean, we have had hybrid regimes in South America. Perhaps what Mo was describing about Iran is also a form of a populism that has the elements of the hybrid regime, but here also the role of the media is relevant in both forms of populism, let's say the 21st century populism and the one that we have witnessed toward the end of the 20th century, like in the case of Iran and some other countries in South America. But this particular kind of populism, with this particular methodology of use of social media, of grassroots mobilization, of the methodology of movement, and in particular the phenomenon of fake news and the so-called post-truth era. This is something, I don't know what this is. Is this coming from my phone? I've been having technical difficulties. I don't know.
No, it wasn't from yours. It was from Jonathan. I think Jonathan is
okay.
In two systems, but go ahead. This type of populism has its specificities, and also the ideology behind this kind of populism, what is currently in America called the alt-right, and what we have had in a different form under different names, we in Eastern Europe, I'm referring to Eastern Europe, is something specific for this era, and we should relate Trump
to these specificities, to these methodologies, to this phenomenon. Actually, the only, sorry, God, I mean, I've been having such bad luck. Now the cat's knocked down the light. Can you see me?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So
We can see you.
first the phone goes, then the cats. Sorry. So this is why it's hard to keep pace and continuity with the previous conversation. So I would relate it, the whole phenomenon to other places than to previous times and to the, I don't know, preceding eras like the era of Obama. The ideology, talking about the alt-right. Alt-right is just another form of the so-called illiberal democracy. We have been witnessing in Eastern Europe and in many of the cases in countries that are members of the European Union. Talking about the phenomenon, about the role of media, the phenomenon of fake news. There is nothing spontaneous there, nor is there any, I don't know, it's not a, how do you call it, an accidental thing, the noise there. It is a methodology. And we have witnessed the use of this methodology in some of the countries of the former Eastern Bloc. I'm not sure if Yugoslavia, Yugoslavia did not belong to the Warsaw Pact, but it did belong to the Eastern Bloc. So we have witnessed the use of this kind of methodology in some of the, let's say, former Yugoslav countries, but also in other Eastern European countries. I'm most familiar with the cases of Serbia and Macedonia. We have had the kind of portals producing the noise intentionally that you have witnessed in the case of Trump's campaign, the entire phenomenon of fake news. We have been witnessing this methodology of informing throughout the 10 years of our own Trump, the former prime minister of Macedonia, Gruevski, who has set up portals with even similar aesthetics, similar communication methodologies, similar style of informing, this bombastic, intentional kitsch, for example, I mean deliberate kitsch, etc. All of that has been at use while I don't know, maintaining the power of those in government, but also in ample use in denigrating the opponents, the opposition. So all of this is very familiar to me, and what looks so surreal to me, incredible, unbelievable, is that maybe for the first time in my life, I'm witnessing a movement of a model from the East toward the West. I see this methodology fully developed here and enacted there in the United States, and this is what looks so incredible. So I don't know, in the end I would add something for which I have absolutely no data to confirm my intuition, but my intuition is that it is by no means accident that the 100 website of fake news were located in the city of Veles in Macedonia. I don't think that it is a coincidence at all. These things do not happen spontaneously. So I mean, I don't want to enter into any conspiracy theories here. My only point is that this is a model that has been recently, in the first decades of the 21st century, developed mostly in Eastern Europe. They have drawn on the examples of hybrid regimes in South America and elsewhere from the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, but they have their own specifics, and these specifics are particularly relevant for Eastern, or have been at use in Eastern Europe, in Russia as well. I would add that in Russia we still see this massive use of television. Putin uses television mostly, but in Hungary and in former Yugoslavia, we see this massive use of the social media. So, and also the method of fake news. And, you can, write to the, there are also official outlets. For example, in Macedonia, they report false stories on you. You keep writing back, sending proofs, etc., proving that they're wrong in the way they report about you. They don't care. They produce and expand the previous lie. So it's a method of propaganda, actually. The use of noises has been an old method. I mean, a really old one. So I see this as an elaborate method, and I don't see this as as accident. The presence of noise. I don't see any spontaneity in the fake news phenomenon and the post-truth argument. Quite to the contrary, I think that it is an elaborate method, and it draws on examples from Eastern Europe.
Katerina, I wanted to bring in again like a post-revolution Iran like anecdote, which is kind of very interesting, and I think it's maybe it's scary, but it might have something to say about what kind of attitudes we will expect. In post-revolution Iran, what happened was Ayatollah Khomeini had these unofficial and indirect relationship with hardline religious pressure groups that were kind of like the alt-right in a way, right? And then the way this relationship was sort of managed was that these people will go and act not on behalf of the new government or Ayatollah Khomeini, but in his name, and they would break the law. So say they would burn a bookstore, or they would attack an opposition leader's home, right? But then Ayatollah Khomeini would not condemn this as an act of even though somebody's breaking the law, right? And then it totally confused the liberal opposition, which is all we had back then, in terms of what to do with this, right? And then it was only later on that people kind of theorized that how breaking the law was sort of like encouraging the breaking of the existing law was part of the establishment, indirectly establishment of the new law. So rather than actually implementing new laws, he had these people breaking the old laws, and kind of and then by doing that, they would create a buffer around the new system by being sort of the avant-garde people who will break the law and kind of shield the system. And this is how the new laws kind of came into being. It was by the old set of laws or norms being broken by these people who were kind of quasi-associated with the new government, but not directly, but they were never condemned. I don't know if anybody wants to take this up, because we might see some of that starting to happen.
That is the logic of revolution, right? Revolution is this divine violence which suspends everything that is law or that has been law previously, and the only thing that can justify this unlawful or violent behavior is the logic, the argument, the sole argument of revolution. So
but Trump did not come to power with revolution. Trump was elected, and he's supposed to uphold the Constitution.
Yeah, I know, but he also called his election a revolution, a product of a movement. I mean, why isn't it a classical political presidential campaign? Why is it called movement? I mean, he's adding a dimension of revolution there. which can, I mean, how is it normal to announce that based on leaks and media reporting, you would decide as a president to put in prison your opponent? I mean, is this normal logic, a logic of normal times? It's not false when, you know, people state that, you know, this is not normal. I mean, we can, you know, question what is normality, but yes, there is a sense there, a sensation that we are sort of put outside of I don't know, the frame, the frames or the structures that we perceive as normal. There is anxiety of a certain displacement. There is something abnormal about this election and about the election of Trump, and it is unsettling for everybody, because if we have been terrified for years of, I don't know, Erdogan, of our own little dictators here, not dictators, democratically elected authoritarian presidents and prime ministers here, fearing them, but hoping that elsewhere there is some more normal, again the word normal, system, some healthier society we could escape to, or whatever, that there is an escape. Now there is a sense that there is no escape, that the globe is covered with all these Erdogans, including Trump, as this Trump Putin Erdogan in one figure. So this is what is so scary about him, and why this election is so unsettling. And yes, there is some sort of abnormalization with this election, and it is precisely, it comes precisely from these undertones of revolution there. The revolution, the logic of revolution, the logic of a momentum of, you know, shaking up, as Zizek said, the old system and bringing something radically new. So this opening would be would entail automatically the logic of revolution, and that logic would justify presidents' violence and you know, intolerance toward the political opponents.
Ina, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with much of what Katerina's saying. I mean, especially around the kind of the encouragement of types of extra or para state violence that many countries have seen for a very long time. And I wanted to kind of obviously Trump's inaugural speech has now been given, and as we would have expected, I mean, it's a sort of patriotic roar with very little content. And I want to more like pose a question to everyone about, in a way, the future of work and the future of class in America, in the sense that, you know, when Trump speaks about this making America strong again and putting America first, and, you know, these hours of action, I mean, of course it's you know, right-wing authoritarian populist, but it's completely unsurprisingly also, but bereft of content in the sense of a national project, in terms of what labor might look like, in terms of what income and living might actually look like for the vast majority of people in the country. So it's more a question to everybody else, really, about the future of work and the future of to live in America. I mean, what it's going to mean for the vast majority of the country, and how this relates to this overspill of violence, and perhaps the encouragement, or at least permissive relation to sexual violence against women, to violence against minorities, to, you know, all of those forms of violence that we see all the time. Yeah.
Doug, do you want to like jump in?
Well, excuse me, I just wanted to say something about the future of work. Every few years, the Bureau of Labor Statistics does a set of economic projections, and they project which job categories, which industries are going to grow and shrink over the next decade. And the projections, and I'm not saying that these are necessarily right, but this is what the official thinking of the US government is, so it seems sort of important to talk about it. the official projections are that most jobs of the future of the next 10 years will require no more than a high school education and brief on-the-job training.
Yeah.
So the overwhelming majority of employment is very, very low quality. There are some jobs at the top, a whole bunch at the bottom, and not very much in the middle. So when you look at somebody like Betsy DeVos proposing an overhaul of the public school system to turn them into for-profit centers or charter schools or religious schools or whatever, what I see the vision of the future is that the American ruling class has really lost all faith in the dynamic future of the country. And the schools will turn into holding pens for all but the most elite students. And then some capitalists are going to try to make money on it. It's a gruesome future, and it would have been a little different had Hillary Clinton been elected as well. Nobody's talking about any kind of ambitious attempts to provide better jobs, some sort of Green New Deal agenda. Hillary flirted with that very lightly, but not very much. Obama flirted with that too, but also not very much. And of course, Trump is going to like just drill, baby, drill, and rip everything apart and just strip the Earth of carbon and the atmosphere of its ability to sustain life. So I don't know. It looks very, very grim and mundane in that way, unless there's some sort of serious upsurge. And people do talk a lot about a fascist threat and internment camps. I'm a little skeptical of that. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's overdone. I also see a great potential for resistance. So I'm not hanging my head in total despair. I mean, this is a grim day, and I'm certainly not happy that it's no longer President-elect Trump. But maybe we can do something out of this, because the center left is dead and bankrupt, and maybe there's some energy coming further from the left. So maybe it's not hopeless.
And maybe we could have Liza, if you would like to join. Thanks for joining us today. I don't know if you want to say anything about kind of where education might be going and what people might do about that. And then also, if you have any thoughts, one thing we've been talking about is kind of how do we think retrospectively now of, for example, Hillary, Obama, Bernie. Retrospectively, how should we think about them now and going into the future? So either of those or whatever you would like to contribute.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me, by the way? I never do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think in terms of education, it's important to note that while somebody like Betsy DeVos is part of a continuity of the kind of neoliberal education reform we've seen under Obama and the Democrats, it is a really, really extreme agenda. I mean, it is, for-profit charter schools, online charter schools. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that has been really opposed even by the mainstream privatizers. So, not to say there are good privatizers and bad privatizers, but I think it is important to note what a sudden extreme turn this education reform movement has taken. And I don't know if that has global implications or not, but it certainly has really serious implications for the U.S. Working class. Because it is really going to be the working class who is going to suffer from these kinds of reforms. They're very unlikely to affect wealthy people in the suburbs whose public schools are already decent. The amount of quick opposition that is mobilized, like among regular parents. To Betsy DeVos as nominee for by Trump has been pretty heartening, and it's not as though we personally can really affect this nominee, but it shows the kind of organizing on this issue that really could continue and could keep going. I mean, in terms of your question about Hillary versus Bernie, I mean, I think that this moment is really showing us that what a huge difference there is between a sort of progressive democratic socialist wing of the American left versus the centrist Democrats. I mean, I was personally in meeting with the staff of our New York senators yesterday with a whole bunch of parents and kids, and you know, one of our senators, or one of our Democratic Hillary-esque senators, said she could not even commit to voting against Betsy DeVos, like this incredibly extreme right-wing appointee. The Democrats, the mainstream Democrats, are utterly useless. And in contrast, that like, who is a mainstream person who's part of American public life, who is organizing any kind of opposition, is basically Bernie Sanders. I mean, he and his organization are organizing the rallies to save Social Security. They're the ones working on trying to save any shred of healthcare for the American working class. I mean, that's all there is. Like, I mean, there is Bernie Sanders, and there is everyone further to the left of him has the potential to do something. And I think that the Democrats are really seem deeply committed to demonstrating how useless they are in opposing the right-wing agenda.
What about that question? What about I mean, we've talked a bit about tensions between, say, centrist Democrats and kind of Bernie-crats, but what also about those who would say that Bernie himself is not really a socialist and is therefore not worth pursuing, and that we should be exclusively Trotskyist or Leninist in everything that we have to say, or anything like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Me?
Yeah.
I find that very silly, frankly. I mean, I think everybody who is able to organize people and articulate a clear agenda to help the working class is useful right now. And Bernie Sanders is demonstrably somebody who's doing that. Much of the American labor movement isn't even doing that. You know, I mean. So like, I think, you know, whether you're a Trotskyist or a social democrat, if you are articulating an agenda that is going to better the lives of the working class, and you're getting out there organizing people, that's helpful. Like, it doesn't really matter what your particular secular views are.
Lisa, you and Doug, actually, because, you know, I'm going to try to like articulate Jason's question in a more sort of like popular format, which is like, you two wrote 2 anti-Hillary books that came out. Doug's book came out before the primaries really got heated, and your book came out just about the time when it was really hot. As these 2 American authors, left-wing authors, who really like question Hillary's legitimacy, both as a leftist candidate and as a feminist candidate, what do you have any regrets for what you did, and what do you think what did you do? Do you have any feelings towards it when you in retrospect, when you look back? And also, Katarina posted some sort of like very controversial and strong opinion about this on Facebook last night. So I'm just trying to like engage you guys. Maybe we can get some interesting conversation going here between you two on one side, and then say Katarina from the other.
Well, I'll jump in. No, I have no regrets at all. And when I first started doing this Hillary research back in the summer of 2014 for what was going to be my cover story in Harper's that then got expanded into the book, I told a bunch of my liberal friends, I said, you know, I have political objections to her. I know you don't, but even if you do, you should recognize the fact that she's a crappy candidate. Nobody likes her. She's got all these scandals that are going to blow up at any time, and you're going to regret putting all your eggs in that basket. And they just dismissed me with the most rude, obscene reactions. And you know, aside from my political critique of her, I feel completely vindicated in my sense of what a terrible candidate she was going to be, and how she lost Donald Trump. That's the most amazing feat for someone who is supposed to be, you know, the anointed next president of the United States. It was her turn, and she blew it. So I feel no No regrets about that at all. My critique turned out to be totally accurate. And there, I think a lot of Democrats who want to blame people like me for Hillary's loss because I somehow discouraged people from voting for her. She did win the popular vote. We, have to make that point. And it was our stupid electoral college that delivered the presidency to Donald Trump, that holdover from the slaveholders. So, it's when people talk about the threat that Trump represents to American democracy, I would have to say that American democracy wasn't in such great shape to start with, because of these structural reasons, because of the wretched Constitution. That's 18th century governing structure we live under. It's all a mess. And we didn't need Trump. We didn't need Putin, rather, to invent the electoral college. The eagerness of most mainstream Democrats to blame everyone else but their own candidate and their own weak ideology for their loss is really stunning, and it almost suggests they really have a death wish. We're talking at the beginning of this conversation about, I guess we're dancing around the topic of Thanatos, but I think that the Democratic Party seems very immersed in the ethic, the ethos of death.
What about you, Lisa? And the fact that one thing I noticed was that even though there were a lot of reluctance towards embracing Bernie by mainstream white feminists, they actually didn't go out there and passionately argue for Hillary and put their name and reputations on the line and defend her and actually openly. So there was this weird relationship that her constituency of say quote unquote white feminists, professionally employed white feminists had with her. They wanted her, but they wouldn't put their name behind her, passionately argue for her. And so how do you feel about this whole thing?
Well, I think that one of the reasons why we saw the rise of Trump was precisely because this kind of what Nancy Fraser has called progressive neoliberalism doesn't address most people's needs and is inherently socially divisive in the way that it favors elites and has only contributed to downward mobility and social anxieties. So that we see the right rising, the populist right rising as a global phenomenon right now because of that. So Hillaryism breeds Trumpism. So I certainly blame Hillary and the Democrats for the rise of Donald Trump, much more than I would blame myself for being critical of Hillary or Doug. On the other hand, I think we all have to take responsibility for the important things that happen in our world, and I certainly wish that, like a lot of other people, I had taken the serious possibility of a Trump. I had taken more seriously the possibility that Trump would win. And I certainly wouldn't have stopped me from being very critical of Hillary, or of putting that book together, which I think False Choices assembled an incredibly important collection of left-wing women's voices. But at the same time, yes, do I wish I had been more aware, more serious about the possibility that Trump could also be president, and that would be bad too. Yeah, I do, and I think a lot of people are in the same position.
You want to jump in? Unmute yourself, please.
Okay, so it's not controversial, at least not to you, Mo. We have discussed these things in the past. I have been openly supporting Hillary throughout the campaign. Also, at the beginning, not really. I was, of course, like everybody else at the beginning, seduced by Sanders. But very soon, I recognized in the way the online campaigning was developing that there was too much post-truth there. There was too much propagandism. There was too much statements, arguments depicting of Hillary in ways which were simply inaccurate. They were not true. All that very soon got this aura of misogynistic resentment that could not even be rationalized by the campaigners. So the more it developed this approach in the grassroots campaigning, the more I was drawn to siding with Clinton, and I was also repelled by the empty, purely demagogical rhetoric of revolution behind Sanders, with nothing to substantiate the claims of him being a socialist and being a revolutionary. There was absolutely nothing there which resonates with revolutionary intents, except from what you, the elements of, I don't know, an intention to create the president according to the model you described that applied to Khomeini in Iran. So it was simply a method of campaigning, the rhetoric of revolution, and this method of campaigning, which had the element, actually the fundament of revolution, would have justified just, I don't know, substantiated claims about her. So that is how I perceived the rhetoric of revolution there. So I was strongly, I don't know, repelled by it. And I would say that actually this campaign which breathed Trump, not Hillary's. Not just because I dislike him or Trump, I dislike illiberal democracy. I'm terrified. Any form of liberalism.
Katerina, you're breaking up just a little. You're breaking up just a little bit. So maybe, and I also had a question for you, because I always find these types of kind of double and triple articulations kind of interesting, because on the one hand you're saying that Bernie was, basically you're saying that Bernie was not truly socialist, or was not truly kind of revolutionary, and then on the other hand you ended up supporting Hillary. So so I don't know, I just find that interesting when those types of things kind of come together. I don't know if I hope that your audio is working now, if you want to respond, or you could, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, my phone is freezing all the time because it's heating up for some reason. It's freezing, so this is why I'm breaking. Maybe I should restart it again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, try to answer. And then if it goes back,
just, I think I should restart it again. Should I?
Yeah, we actually can hear you. It's
good right now. Okay, she's gone. Okay.
No, she's.
Maybe Doug can jump in, because or Catherine.
I'm here, Mo.
Okay, sorry.
I just removed the video, hoping that it, although it's not the connection.
It's not that you really should leave and come back, and we will get to you.
Okay.
Okay, so Catherine or Doug or Lisa, do you want to respond to that?
I'll just say I don't really follow the logic of saying that since Sanders was no socialist, then you're going to go for Hillary, since she is like the embodiment of precisely what has been wrong with democratic politics for the last 25 or 30 years, which is business friendly, very pro-military, and tough on crime. And, we know all the indictments. I wrote a book, it's not a long book, but I wrote a book that is full of criticisms of Hillary that are all factual. It's not, nothing, there are no lies in there. There's no misogyny in there. And this notion that somehow the Sanders campaign got too vicious against her and unleashed all these horrible forces leaves me scratching my head, because I suffered immense amounts of abuse for not signing on with the Hillary bandwagon and for daring to criticize her. It was just it was a terrible time. But I will say that that the Sanders campaign has opened up possibilities in American politics like I haven't seen in decades. It's been and we can criticize him for being a mild social democrat, which is what he is. He's not a socialist. He's not a revolutionary. But by the standards of American political life, to talk about the kinds of things he did, universal social benefits rather than neoliberal targeted benefits, for example, to bring notions of solidarity into American politics, into this extremely individualistic competitive realm, that is in some sense revolutionary. For an American to wake up tomorrow and have a single-payer healthcare system would make you feel like you'd undergone some kind of revolution. The brutality of this system is so profound and so pervasive that the challenge that Sanders raised to it was really very, very dramatic. And what was so exciting, first of all, that he just came on the scene and made a big splash. Nobody thought that there's anybody's going to block Hillary's road to the nomination, but that he revealed that there's an immense constituency for this kind of politics, especially among younger people. So you can complain about the mildness of his agenda and that he's not really a socialist and that we need something more seriously left. But I think he's opened up a very big space for just that kind of thing. So you've got people organizing with his post-campaign group, Our Revolution. They're moving to take over the California Democratic Party, which in a way is reminiscent of the way the right took over the Republican Party in the 70s. That's very exciting. But also you've got explosion in memberships for groups like DSA and Solidarity, an explosion of interest in magazines like Jacobin. So there's also an explosion of interest in the far left. And if we play this right and we were able to talk to real people about how we might be able to make their lives better, then something good might come out of all this.
Stephen, you had an interesting idea, a speculative idea. Maybe we can pursue that.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything Doug just said, but I wanted to just prevent the counterfactual. Let's say Bernie had won the Democratic nomination. What would have happened in the general election? And the Democratic Party would not support him very well. They'd do a lot of things to sabotage him. Now, maybe that wouldn't matter since they turned out to be so lame in electing Hillary and trying to elect Hillary. But let's assume he just got inaugurated instead of Trump. What would happen? I think you'd find the Congress, not only Republicans but the Democrats as well, would probably block him, everything he tried to do, much more vigorously than they are trying to block Trump. They wouldn't let any of his appointments through. They would draw an absolute line against things like single payer and things like that. They'd say things like some of Hillary's supporters have said that it doesn't affect women or blacks when what happens to the banks, which is completely ridiculous. So I'm just putting that up as a we would have had real political struggle going on. It wouldn't be that Bernie could just do what we'd like him to.
But Stephen, that would have opened up different possibilities of different types of resistance by bringing people to the street, demanding certain things that they already had someone in the White House advocating.
I mean, sure. I mean, I'm agreeing it would have been a better outcome, but we shouldn't imagine, that the very entrenched opposition on the part of the rich in both parties to letting these things happen is really there. And even if we elected a president, would still be something to deal with. So I'm sure. I mean, I voted for Bernie, and I would have loved to be able to vote in the general election as well. But again, we should be realistic about how this struggle is working.
So can I say something about realism?
Go ahead.
So very early on, I was attacked personally and publicly for being unrealistic. Bernie can't get things done. Hillary gets things done. He didn't get anything done, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, she didn't get things done because she didn't get herself elected. Number one. But number two, what Bernie Sanders has tapped into is actually the sense of economic anguish and anxiety that is pervasive throughout a society that, as Barbara Ehrenreich described in the 80s, has cut away every single social safety net. So basically, there's nothing between you and economic disaster if you're not part of the 1%, or maybe the 4%. But even the 4% is suffering because of the skyrocketing cost of healthcare and higher education. The fact that Donald Trump spoke more effectively to that sense of struggle than Hillary Clinton did, because she didn't mention jobs, she didn't go to Wisconsin, and she didn't go to Michigan, is just completely mind-boggling. Bernie Sanders also spoke in a way that was very direct and authentic through all the channels, not without Twitter, but just in his personal speeches, in his public declarations, and he continues to do so during the congressional hearings. The Democratic Party now is a kind of imperium in crisis. There's a sense of entitlement and outrage. The fact of the matter is that California elected its state delegates within the party, and out of 1,100, I think 600 to 700 delegates are now Bernie-crats. So at that level, people are talking about universal health care. People are talking about free child care. People are talking about raising the minimum wage. These are, in America, radical reforms. What Hillary Clinton kept trying to do was slice bits of the moderate suburban Republican voter into a camp. And it just didn't work. But why was she doing these things where people wanted to fight for $15 an hour as a minimum wage? Hillary said $12.50. It was like the $11.99 argument. And she kept making that argument. Doug Henwood talked about this. And they were so confident that this kind of slicing of the moderate Republicans into creating a Democratic coalition that basically abandoned the working class and held minorities hostage because they were the party of multiculturalists and tolerance, not equality or social justice, was going to work as a Democratic formula. That formula is not working. But if you look at the Democratic leadership today, and I think Doug Henwood talked about this at the beginning, they are still looking for that formula. And Cory Booker, before his disastrous vote against the importation of pharmaceutical drugs from Canada, was being groomed as the 2020 candidate. So on top of this, I cannot just emphasize this enough, an economic situation in the United States that's really brought millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people to the brink of catastrophe. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders talked to struggle, the struggle of the people. And that maybe that was left-wing populism, right-wing populism. I think populism is hugely misunderstood. The mainline Democratic elite and that leadership was unable or refused, I don't understand, to address any of those issues in a satisfactory manner. So you can say it was misogyny or Hillary hating or lies. This is the other thing about totalitarian regimes that, I grew up with in the background of my family. Whenever there's dissent, you say the dissenters are influenced by foreigners. In China, during the Tiananmen Square thing, you talk about incitation. And this is exactly what we're having from the Democratic leadership. I never thought I'd live to see this in the United States, but they're saying we're influenced by foreigners. The far left, recently in Politico, Doug was smeared by a journalist who said that the far left was influenced, seduced by Putin. So I like Katerina's use of seduced by Sanders. Like we're all just a bunch of marks who were somehow swayed by his smoke and mirrors. Sanders actually had very few smoke and mirrors going on in his campaign. So I think it's risible that that kind of Sanders followers are just hypnotized, mesmerized, mass cultural spectators, and the Hillary-crats were the rational ones. That argument to me is just risible.
If I could say a couple things. One, I agree with Stephen Shaviro that if Bernie had become president, the resistance would be enormous from Democrats and Republicans alike, the media, and probably, like Trump is learning the CIA as well. But it's quite possible we would have had a different Congress if he had won the presidency. We might have had a more progressive Congress than we do now, instead of this gang of reactionaries that are running the show. But also, I would say there's a lot to be learned for the longer term. One of the things that Sanders did so successfully was, intellectuals are used to like really complicated agendas, complicated analyses. Sanders kept saying the same 4 or 5 things over and over again, doing them very well, and he looked like he really meant what he was saying. Hillary Clinton had no principles. She had a lot of position papers, but no principles. Trump also banged away at a few simple messages, and that's what's successful. So that's something we should learn about doing politics, is you talk about 4 or 5 things that speak to people's lives, and not try to get too clever about your appeal, and do it with a considerable degree of passion and very direct language. And Bernie is old. He's 75, 76. He's probably not going to be in politics all that much longer, but we need to think about what the future is going to look like, and there's a tremendous promise in what he's opened up, and I don't want to lose that. I think we need to figure out how to nurture it, extend it. I'm a little concerned that we're seeing a revival of the culture of protests around this J20 thing. Even that name J20 takes me back 15 years when we had all those N30s and a lot of the sorts of things that became very popular back in the anti-globalization movement. But we need to take this spirit and do something about organizing and attaching it to a real agenda. And I think there's more possibility for that sort of thing than we've seen in decades. So I am anxious, nervous facing the Trump presidency, but I'm also looking forward to greater possibilities after it.
Katerina, are you okay? Your sound is okay. Do you want to briefly respond or finish what you were saying? Okay, I kind of don't see her, but while she's getting her microphone maybe working, I just wanted to mention that Jonathan has been with us all the way through, and his mic is not working. So if you have any points, Jonathan, maybe we can switch the screen to you. Maybe we can ask Theodore to switch the screen to you, and maybe you can type some of your opinion for us, so I can maybe read it for people, because you are also very active throughout the primaries and the election, and you have a voice in the art world. You published a journal called Third Rail, and I've worked with you previously. So if you can kind of contemplate and think with us a little bit, it will be wonderful.
And maybe while he's typing that out, I'd just like to ask Nina, do you have any thoughts? Because I know you've been obviously thinking about Mark quite a bit recently. Is there any kind of overall sense that you think that kind of from his legacy that could kind of help us think about these questions in a general sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, it's very difficult politically always to maintain the balance between optimism and pessimism, and we don't need to even think about Gramsci's quote, but also about the relationship between, I guess, politics and emotion, which Mark wrote so well about, particularly in relation to the kind of politicized and political dimensions of depression and mental health. I mean, I think what Mark was trying to do most of the time was in a way provide an analysis that both recognized the scale of the violence and the horror on a personal and a collective level, but always to leave open the possibility of a kind of a collective left project. I mean, the last thing he was working on before his death was a manuscript for a book called Acid Communism, which was thinking about in a way resurrecting or looking again at the kind of legacy of psychedelia and those forms of collective cultural ways of being together, which is kind of funny if you knew Mark, because in a sense he was very personally quite austere, but he recognized the possibility and the collective meaning of these kind of ecstatic and situations of riot, protest, and collective enjoyment and so on. And I don't know. I mean, I think there is a sense in which what we've ended up with is this kind of the worst possible version of the weird. The worst possible image of the psychedelic, the kind of disturbing, the relationship between images of violence and untruth and kind of I don't know, horror really. And so I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to think. I mean, the problem is if I start talking about kind of these things in a humanist way, then of course talking about things like reality, or discourses that can help us to actually materially conceive of what is actually genuinely happening in all these different levels, economically, psychoanalytically, collectively, politically, then of course you're leaving yourself open to whatever the opposite of cynicism is in an age in which things are incredibly bad. And I think that's a very dangerous position to be in, or a very vulnerable position to be in. But I nevertheless think this kind of centering vulnerability, like at every level, like what it means to be vulnerable, as someone who's barely making enough money to get by, the vulnerability of someone who is open to kind of homophobic, racist, sexist attack, and all of those things we'll see much more of. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm interested in what people think, how we can collectively counteract this kind of seemingly overwhelming, violence and horror that we're kind of daily surrounded by, and how the media, in terms of its images, reinforces that. But I don't have any great answers. I mean, a kind of new culture, or a culture that resurrects some of the best things of previous eras. But it seems hard to know where that would come from.
Nina, to pick up from what you said sharing experiences. I've been wanting to bring back Stefan and maybe even Devor back into conversation, because they're living in Germany, and particularly Stefan is very active politically and aware of what's going on. And actually, I also forgot to mention that Stefan is also teaching a course on alternatives to money for New Center this semester. I was going to ask him about the German election that's coming up and the outlook in Germany, and how you feel things are going in Germany, and what can be done, or what is being organized in Germany in terms of like the upcoming elections, which can produce very similar results. I mean, England, is already done, right? We got Elizabeth May, and she's totally showing her Trump side by fully embracing what she calls hard Brexit, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if Stefan wants to join in and talk about like Germany. Unmute yourself if you can, because you're mute. There we go. You got to go on top of the screen and unmute.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, I should be there. Fine. Yeah. No, actually Germany cannot really serve as a good comparison, because in comparison, for example, to the East European countries, we didn't have that type of policy. We also don't, in comparison to the rest of Europe, we don't have a strict austerity. The Germans are imposing the austerity on the rest of Europe, so to say, to the inside, it still looks like a functional state. So I would say almost we're lagging behind some 10 years. Let's assume if that's the future, Germany lags behind. There's not much to be told about the German elections. They're likely going to be boring. And the AfD, which is the right-wing parallel to Trump, is not going to make more than 15%, and there's going to be another Merkel coalition. So there's really not much that one can learn from Germany. More interesting is now the upcoming Dutch election, and in the Netherlands, you really have a parallel to Trump. It's Wilders, and he might make 40%. But I tend to have the impression that we're getting stuck too much on that theatrical level. Whilst the level that is actually, for me, more important is the, let's see, what are the decisions in the back? What is the geopolitical, geostrategical options that are going to happen? And from that point of view, I share a little bit of my Berlin colleague that says, in the end, very many people, and also me, were happy that Clinton didn't make it in the end. Of course, you were all for Sanders, but when faced with that terrible choice, we're still waiting what actually, in terms of politics, comes out of it.
You don't think the anti-refugee resentment would somehow enter the picture factor in the picture in a large way, to kind of like despite the fact that Germany has not experienced austerity?
No, we're beyond the peak in refugees. The refugee numbers came down quite a bit. They tried as much as possible to make it a non-topic for the coming elections, and I think they're going to manage to do that. Personally, I would say the right-wing party has already reached its peak. They're about to dismantle themselves. There's lots of infights within that party. I would suggest I hope no bad surprise from the German side in that case. So
possible that Germany will become and Berlin in particular, and Germany becomes like the metropolitan of what's left of liberalism then. Like Germany and Berlin has to kind of like carry the weight of New York and carry the weight of America.
No, Germany has a very strange attitude towards politics. On the one hand, it's very hegemonic when it comes to Europe, to European policy. On the other hand, it doesn't look like it has any power politics ambition, so to say. There's lots of ambition in terms of industry politics, and of course there's the internal, as I said, the internal battle between the Eurasians and the transatlantic people, and there's going to be a big shift how they deal with the fact that on the other side of the Atlantic you have somebody, inaccessible like Trump, but that's still not settled. We're going to have to wait what comes out of it, and it's a very strange position that Germany finds itself in, if one can talk like that.
Can I add something?
Go ahead. Yes, definitely.
I mean, I agree. I think Stefan is 100% right. The point is that we learned from the experience in America, and they all shifted to the right. So basically, this is the solution. Even the Green or Left Party so shifted to the right to scoop the people who would vote for AfD, so to say, for the right wing. So. But this is also kind of interesting because it means that the programs and the parties themselves only became a simulation of himself, so to say. So right now it's just about to scoop as many people as you can into your party, but it doesn't matter anymore what you stand for, basically. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So there's no program anymore in the background, basically. Yeah. Which also points again. At the idea that democracy as we know it is an effect or a phenomenon that relates to a certain type of media and a certain type of technology. And in the moment when we have new technologies and new media, this whole system doesn't make sense anymore. And this is what is happening, I think, right now, so to say. So the parties that we have, as the Germans say, the party landscape is purely virtual because they don't realize any ideologies anymore, so to say. So
if you can get closer to the mic or speak louder, and also address the left party. What is the role of the left party, or any kind of like hope in the left party, German's left party?
Zero. There is no hope because we have been ostracized as socialists and communists, so we don't have there's no way to gain any voters. On the other hand, No, there's no left party. So to say. Yeah, I don't know. And the other one that would have been progressive liberal, the green ones, they also turned more and more into like liberal market-oriented ideology, so to say. So what I'm saying is this: it seems as if politics totally follows the market. Let's say like this. So there is no politics is not a counterweight to the market anymore. And I'm saying all of them, not only the classical, like center parties or something, but all of them turned into supporters of the system, and exactly because of the right, so to say, in the reaction of the too far right, so to say, they all tend to become market liberal. You see what I'm saying? So you have to save the market, you have to save liberality from the fascists. But yeah, and this is a problem. It's a big shift. It's a big political shift because it means politics don't exist anymore, basically. And the point is now, I think that the right parties in America and in Europe are basically scooping up the people who still believe that there could be a politics. You see what I'm saying? So the big majority of 60-70% vote for the party that doesn't make them think politically. And the other ones want to produce politics, but it doesn't work anymore. So we have basically like a tectonic shift between two, so to say, civilizational or cultural or political structures. Where you still have people who believe in politics, and where you have people who don't believe that there's anything, that politics can do anything.
Stefan, if you want to state your disagreement about the left party, go ahead. You are mute. So you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm, okay. I wouldn't be that pessimistic when it comes to the left, but it's a double-sided thing. Okay, first, of course, there is a left party structure, and it technically can do things. And there is now a government in Berlin that consists of the Social Democrats, like neoliberal socialists, whatever, Blairites, plus the Green Party, which turned into a neoconservative party, and the leftists. So it doesn't look that good, but at least it's an attempt to build a new model, a leftist model, also in Germany. It could be something. It could be something that is also being done on a national level. Then there's several governments in Europe that are leftist, and what is kind of come under the radar is the government in Portugal, that also economically seems to be doing well, and that somehow manages to realize something that was denied to the Greek. So it's not all that hopeless. At the same side, you have these old party structures, the European party structures, that, to my surprise, proved much less reformable than the party structures in the Anglo-Saxon Anglo-Saxon political system. I always thought, okay, we have many different parties, so we can also have many different opinions but actually the parties rather serve the purpose to shield political outside opinions from their representation. So the system is there a bit difficult. And then there's one thing that when I look at the left, that I sometimes discuss with friends. Actually, we had lots of leftist movements in Europe. Like it was the in Spain, or also the movement in Greece at the beginning, and for some reason I have the impression that what happens in Germany, that left parties almost shields the environment against a leftist movement in Germany. Let's say like that, because we have that party that already takes that position. There's no possibility to grow a political movement out of there. So at the same time, I wouldn't give up all the hope, but there's not really we're never going to see the big political movement out of Germany. That I'm pretty sure.
Thank you for that. Jason, do you want to like? Are you around, Jason? Maybe you're gone. Maybe Jason dropped out. Stephen, you had some notes about somebody as conservative and austerity enforcing as Angela Merkel is the last humanist hope for every fascism. That reminded me of that big question we asked in our statement about like the Membay's article, and if you people have, any of you have read Membay's piece of how you feel about Nina, before you go, you probably read that Ashil Membay's piece, right, about end of humanism. So it would be great to maybe end with a discussion on that, because we're about like 20 minutes left of the time we slotted for this event. So just before you leave, I'm catching you again. If you have any reflections, because you also like you've been the most theoretical and philosophical one of all so far, which I totally like appreciate. I
think possibly it might be a coping mechanism, but maybe not a very appealing one. I mean, I agreed with Bembe's analysis. I mean, as extremely stark as it was, in terms of the death of very many aspects of a certain way of thinking, living, being together. Which is why I suppose, to reiterate this kind of open question about what can we take from already existing kind of communities and forms of organization, I'm very interested in, I guess the way people I know in Bosnia, for example, who are heavily involved in plenums and protests, who are very interested in psychoanalysis and Islam, and these things are not incompatible with their political practice, right? These are all part of the same image of the world, and it's a way of thinking about living together, which is around questions of need and not want, and I suppose an acceptance, as I said before, of a fundamental connectedness and vulnerability that we all share, and a kind of mutual dependency. And I think unless we start from those kind of the communities and the political forms of organization that already exist. I mean, one of the most annoying tropes on the left, it seems to me, is this idea that we must fundamentally come up with something new, as if people aren't already organizing and haven't been for a long time. And I mean, whether we look to, we can look all over the place. We can look to kind of religious communities. We can look to, existing kind of anti-free market forms of education, forms of association, forms of mutual support and care, and everything. So I don't know. I mean, it's got to come from something that already exists. And this is why I think, given that we know that vulnerability and collectivity do exist, and that's the thing that's kind of endlessly attempted to be destroyed, basically, by these particular forms of economies, by debt, by the erosion of collectives of any kind.
So the question I want to ask is that is everything gloomy about this end of humanism, or a form of progressive, emancipatory, and forward-looking post-humanism or transhumanism or something can actually emerge out of these existing practices of knowledge production, resistance, politicality, etc.?
I mean, I find myself sort of increasingly old-fashioned, actually. I mean, I don't see much hope at the moment from the kind, because where did post-humanism and transhumanism end up? It ends in quest for immortality coming from Silicon Valley. It's a fundamental denial of things that we are not yet able to solve. And if you start from the presupposition that we can live forever and we need to go to Mars, and that we need to kind of modify our bodies constantly or whatever. I mean, we're not talking about I don't know. I mean, the problem is that this ends up in a kind of potentially reactionary position, and in a way I have to kind of embrace that. And this is why I think I would hold on to these modes of discourse. I mean, to psychoanalysis, to I don't know, early Marxism, to like a combination of these things. I mean, and to feminism, and particularly aspects of second wave feminism, which are deeply unfashionable these days. And I think those were ways of analyzing the world that make more sense, and they still make sense, right? I don't think things have changed that much. I don't think that there is this great, new hope for the future. Like, the future doesn't belong to the left. I mean, I've obviously argued against so-called left accelerationism and the idea, you know, of repurposing and I mean, I'm not against thinking about the future of technology and work and platforms and so on, but I'm just very, very wary of these kind of easy solutions, as if we can simply say, you know, oh yes, well, transhumanism, fantastic.
No, granted, but I'm saying, like, so if Membe's argument is that humanism's ending, the solution is either to revive humanism or say, okay, maybe a humanism ending is a good thing, and then we're going to go for something else, which is definitely post-humanism, right? Because I don't think of any other term that comes up, right? So what is the strategy? Revival of the elements of humanism that we think are more emancipatory, or we have to just go with this, like, end of humanism and try to think of something else?
Well, like I say, I mean, just to reiterate quickly, I mean, I think in terms of practical organization, it's to look to groups that actually do support one another all the time, you know, not critically, not without criticism, not just to say, oh yeah, let's just import a kind of, you know, Islamic model of human relationality. But I mean, you've got to, I mean, think about the relationship in America and the war on Islam. You know, it's not coincidental that this, you know, destruction of an image of the world and an image of beauty, actually, and an image of solidarity, you know, has to be destroyed. I mean, Trump just reiterated it in his speech, you know, that we need to, I can't remember the phrase, but, you know, we need to destroy international Muslim terrorism or whatnot. You know, I mean, that rhetoric is not going away. So, I mean, I would say, you know, those things exist, or, you know, do you know what I mean? So it's not like they're incompatible with, you know, bits of early humanism or post-humanism or, you know, or organizing. I don't know. That's kind of all I can say, really.
Can I jump in or no?
Of course.
I wanted to say something that Judith Rodenbeck talked about much earlier, and maybe we're older and we're tired, but it's not that I'm not committed to psychoanalysis. I still think it's the most important paradigm to understand both collective and individual experience. But I really think that the debates about post-humanism and transhumanism are purely academic. And she said that she was going to refuse jargon, and I'm refusing jargon as well in that case. I think there is an alternative to humanism. There was a Marxist humanism that's based on collectivism. And I don't understand why we have to go to transhumanism when we can't talk about the collective. I just don't understand. And I don't understand. I think that there's this kind of chic cosmopolitanism about theoretical language right now. And I think that the local level of politics and what I talked about in terms of suffering without hedges and class struggle without hedges cites a level of action and agency that is not located in an individual or a human, but fights for a kind of materialist Marxist humanism that is the humanism of the early Marx. And I would also say that the Frankfurt School is still the best model for the integration of these points. And that's why maybe I was a little harsh with Nina on the theoretical language, but I really, when you guys talk about transhumanism and posthumanism, I really don't know what the stakes are. I feel like there are no stakes here except for some kind of weird abstruse dance that we do behind closed doors. And for me at this moment, I'm very raw, and I think we're all very upset in the United States. You can say that Trump doesn't exist. I think that was like a Baudrillardian statement. I don't know what that means. He very much exists for us. And I'm going to be a vulgar empiricist here. He's actually president of the United States now. So, you know, excuse me if I'm vulgar, but that's it.
While we had this conversation.
I'm trying to simplify the political language to talk about certain stakes here. And I really think that it is about collective action and solidarity versus humanism, not post-humanism or transhumanism.
We have about 10 minutes left, so maybe we can have kind of final words from whoever would like to do that.
Jason, before that, I want to switch the camera actually to Jonathan and read the statement that Jonathan wrote to me on his behalf. So, Theodore, if you can switch the camera to Jonathan. Jonathan has been like voiceless because of technological problem. So Jonathan wrote to me that I agree with Nina about the importance of holding on to the theoretical inquiry, of course, but I'm also curious to hear people's thoughts on developing a left vernacular a vocabulary and new formats for communicating with broader and more diverse audiences to articulate needs and struggles with the platforms we already have at our own disposal as artists, writers, editors, and academics. Maybe you can lip sync. No, I'm kidding. And how do we do this in a media environment in which, as Judith mentioned, students are now having a hard time distinguishing, by the way, between the facts and fiction? Fake news on one hand, intentional lies on the other. So yeah, so this was like Jonathan's 5 cents. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for bearing with us, not being able to join the conversation. It's nice to have you, and I'm sure that we'll be working with each other in the future. So yeah, so back to you, Jason.
Yeah, so I was just saying that we have about 10 minutes left. It looks like the the riots are finally breaking out. So if people want to make any last comments or kind of wrap up statements that you'd like to do, feel free.
I would like to.
Please do.
Yeah, I would just like to follow up also on the other. So I think the problem is that we are still making up an antagonism between left and right. The point is, left and right are phenomena that are an effect of certain types of social organization, so to say. They have a certain function. And what I'm saying is that the spectrum of parties that we know traditionally, like from left and right, they are both already frozen, so to say. We're not productive, so to say, anymore. We are frozen within neoliberalism. And I'm saying that the counter movements, like the Trump alt-right, or in Germany the AfD, they are, so to say, trying to bring back an idea of politics into a landscape that is not political anymore, so to say. So what I'm saying is that the rift or the divergence or the forking is not between left and right, but between a new system that's coming up and the old system. So this is the point. Let's say the Trump movement as a Twitter movement, I mean, and that's why I said it doesn't exist, and that's why I think it has absolutely something to do with post-humanism. What we are seeing now is the spillage of the future into the present. So to say that the problem that we have is that we have a formation of collectives that couldn't have formed themselves before. With classical mass media, we wouldn't have had this movement. This movement itself is only possible as a form, as a collective form, through the new media. You see what I'm saying? So the point is that that what is attacking right now, let's say the system, or if you want to say in the constitution, this alt-right and the right-wing people, they are basically only possible because we have a future technology coming into our present, and we don't know how to deal with it. So to say, you see. So we are on the way to a post-humanistic functionality of organization that cannot be, so to say, delegated to humans or to parties or to ideologies anymore. So this is just the beginning of what you're seeing now. You see what I'm saying? So as a final statement, so to say, if I can sum it up, I'm saying that the rift or the divergence, the forking is not left or right, but old system and future, so to say. And this is what we are seeing now. And we will see that in 10 years when everything is automated, because then we have a big problem, so to say. Then we need some new forms of distribution mechanisms. And those cannot be, how to say, they cannot be embedded or nested into the old system, neither in democracy nor in capitalism, so to say. And this is, and Trump is basically just the last silence before the storm, as the Germans say. It's the last calm moment where we still believe in all politics, while we are not in all politics anymore since a long time, actually. So this is just what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Maybe Stephen?
Okay, I don't know. I agree with a lot of things people are saying about the need for certain collective forms of organization, and I have no idea how that's to be achieved. I think all I can say from my sheltered position is kind of stuff which I'm reading or looking at, which seems to me to be helpful. And I'd mostly mention two things. The first thing is the fairly orthodox Marxist tradition political economy, and the fact that it obviously doesn't work when we talk about the politics part without understanding the economy part. So, I mean, I think, it still gives us a framework to understand how our society works on, our world society works on the broadest level, having to do with the exploitation and accumulation of capital and so on and so forth. The other resource, maybe rather oddly for somebody who just said that, is I read a lot of science fiction, and I'm thinking mostly of science fiction which comes from outside of Anglo-America, white people, either by people of color in the US and the UK or people in other parts of the world who are thinking a kind of, cosmopolitanism, which I would possibly call it, which is not one that liberal or left white opinion in Anglo-America really has. I mean, I don't know. I just trying to write now about two science fiction novels, both of which envision that when the aliens come to Earth, they come to Nigeria rather than to the US or to the UK. I don't know.
Okay.
Or like the three body problem, which might be relevant too.
Anybody else wants to add final words? Oh yeah, Doug wants to say something.
Yes, I would like to come off as a dinosaur. I will speak dinosaur words. I get really exasperated when I hear things that everything is so new now, everything is so revolutionized, all the lessons of the past are out the window. We're in this post-whatever era. It takes me back to my polemics against the new economy like 15 years ago. Material reality is still very similar to what it was those 15 years ago. People have to work for a living. They have a hard time making ends meet. And we learned from the Sanders campaign that old-fashioned political organizing and rallies actually work. Yeah, Donald Trump had Twitter, but he was also able to draw large crowds and talked about things that mattered to people. They're all lies, but he talked about things that mattered to people. And I don't really understand why we need to think about such profoundly novel ways of doing things. We need to recover that sense of solidarity, yes, but we do that through face-to-face action. And it can be done. It's not like this is, that Twitter has not made personal contact, personal organization obsolete. In fact, one of the lessons of the Hillary campaign is that failing to do those things and relying purely on technology to organize and mobilize your voters is a disaster. Like calling people up and knocking on their doors still works. Organizing people in house parties still works. Organizing people at their workplace and in their communities, all these things still work. We don't really need to get so clever that we have to reinvent everything all over again. And I just get, and then, I hear people say, oh, we can't have social democracy anymore because the economy is so changed. I really don't understand that argument at all. But people will say that. People are saying jobs are disappearing because of automation. There's actually no evidence of that at all in economic statistics. So I think, some old verities might serve us as well as better than this fascination with the endlessly new.
Okay, so Jason, what is your thoughts? Anybody else has closing remarks or final words? We would like to hear that. Otherwise, maybe we should thanks everyone and maybe close the session. We're right at, it's 2:00 now, right?
Yeah. I don't know if Judith or Liza or
yeah, it would be great to hear from Judith, actually.
I want to give 3 cheers to Doug on 2 counts. 1, what he just said about face-to-face connection, and 2, to go back to his point about a certain skepticism with regard to protest culture. I'm a teacher. I'm not an activist, but what I do in the classroom matters, and it's face-to-face, and those are the best and most productive kinds of interactions possible. So those are the spaces that we have to work.
Yasemin Nair wrote a very interesting piece about protest that Jason posted on his Facebook last night, and I read it, and I think she's a friend of Doug, and I'm sure that Doug read that piece too, and it's about sort of like both embracing but also problematizing.
Yes.
The culture of protest and what the need of protest right now, especially how Dever was saying, like Trump is still a non-reality because he hasn't done anything. He hasn't taken office yet. He hasn't acted politically yet. He's still a media image, even like today. We'll see what's going to come out of it. But yeah, so it's very interesting that you brought that out of Doug's points about protests.
Yeah, I mean, I think of these as punctuations rather than full sentences, right?
Yeah, so Stefan, do you have any final words? Or Lisa, do you have any final words? And maybe Katharina, we still don't get your mic, right? So anyone who wants to have final words, we're happy to hear.
Yeah, I could say something.
Definitely.
So I think that one of the things that I mean, I think that Doug is right, that and Nina is right too. There's a lot to be said for the old ideas here. That if you look at what people are most productively organizing on right now in the United States, people are defending public education, trying to make its promises actually real and extend to everybody. People are trying to raise wages. Like, that's a very old-fashioned, long-running idea. That's one of the most. That's one of the movements right now here in the United States that has the most traction, and that shows every sign of continuing even under Trump. So these kinds of, people want healthcare. People basically want all the bullet point in the Communist Manifesto where Marx lists all these basic social democratic demands. People still want all those things, and those are the things that people are really organizing around. I don't actually see people inventing that many new forms of anything, and I think that's right now that's what we really need. We need to talk to people face to face and work on things that actually make everyone's lives better.
In a way, you could say that Trump took a page from Bernie's gigantic stadium rallies for those face-to-face aspects. I think that was very interesting.
Katharina's mic is working actually, and
yeah.
I would totally love to hear from her about like building that left party in Macedonia, if she has some words about that or anything else she wants to say, because we were also like upset that she got cut off halfway. We won't have her video, but we have her sound. Go ahead. I don't think we hear you, Katharina.
She's muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, I muted myself by accident. So I don't know, the local left-wing left party, actually, it's called the left. It's modeled mostly in line with the German Die Linke. Die Linke served as the model for the party, although it includes some other elements as well, horizontality, grassroots activist background of these protest groups that formed the party. So it's I don't know, something similar to I guess Syriza, Podemos, and a little bit of Die Linke, but it's we need not go into detail. I am on this model or example of a left-wing party. It's, according to me, yet another example of a failed left-wing or leftist project. And I would just add a footnote to what Davor said. I agree with him that we are actually already now living in a post-political era. This is why both Sanders and Trump are the same to me, because this type of populism is also post-political. The rhetoric and the label of left or right is just an empty sign. It's just an element of a certain PR, and that's it. You can take, I don't know, as a proof, as an empirical proof of this claim, the example of Syriza. Syriza is implementing in Greece measures of austerity and such conservative policies in the country that I don't know, Nea Demokratia, the right-wing party, seems more socialist compared to Syriza right now. So this is why I've been very skeptical throughout this campaign toward both forms of populism, right-wing and left-wing, Sanders and Trump. And I don't know, I would, and maybe that is why Hillary was good enough for me, because my logic was that, and has been throughout these years, because as I mentioned at the beginning, I have been living in this form of illiberal democracy for a long time now, has been that we have to salvage whatever is left from democracy. So maybe this is the political minimum we have to stick to, and then from here on start developing new political visions. Okay, I'll close with this one. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just any other final remarks? Because if there isn't, I just wanted to thanks everyone for giving us your time and being here, all the participants, but also those who tuned in and are watching at home or on. Thanks to Pretzer Gallery for broadcasting this in their space. Also wanted to say that we are offering all these seminars this upcoming season. Our classes begin with Paul's seminar on cryptology and continues on all the way to August. We have seminars by Dever, by Stefan, and by Katerina, and a host of other scholars and thinkers who are going to be teaching for us at the new center. Please join us, become a member, get active. We offer a lot of good services, but also we offer a lot of free educational or discussions like this online. And at least like us on Facebook and follow us, because we'll be engaging with these thinkers and others in the future about topics that hopefully will interest you and have a bearing on your life. So maybe Theodore can close the liveness of this, and then we can just chit chat and say goodbye to each other. Thank you, Theodore, also for helping us with the recording.
You're welcome. I'm ending the broadcast now.
Thank you.
Thank you.